Hey everyone. So I just wanted to give you a little rundown before you hop into this episode because today I did a compilation of emergency medicine residents who are IMGs who have been through the emergency medicine match process. And I want to share my emergency medicine story with you because I'm not a traditional emergency physician. I trained in family medicine for 3 years. I worked as a hospitalist for 6 years. And then I went back to do a 1 year emergency medicine fellowship before becoming certified by the American uh, Board of Physician Specialties in emergency medicine. And it's important that I share that there's a distinction between what I did and what the audience or what the guests today are going to share with you. They are emergency medicine trained, so they did 3 year or 4 year residencies, whereas I did a fellowship. And so when you listen in from what path do I go, which is this is for the person who is going into emergency medicine straight out the right off the bat, and they're not doing a primary fellowship, a primary residency in primary care, and then pursuing a fellowship. I hope you really listen till the very end. I have actually, three of the members that you're going to hear, or three of the doctors you're going to hear from, are people I coached, two specifically through my program, and that's Doctors Lara and Dr. Olalade. And I want you to listen to their perspectives and how really the course helped them, and even how the community within the course was even more beneficial. So stay tuned. The IMG Roadmap is the only podcast dedicated to coaching international medical graduates in success blueprints for this unique pathway. I am Dr. Nina Loom, your host, a previous IMG turned hospital medicine physician, healthcare administrator, speaker, and coach. I empower, encourage, and equip you with actionable steps that you can take towards the residency position of your dreams. Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of the IMG Roadmap podcast. Today, I have Dr. Eric Hackman with us on the show. Welcome on the show, Dr. Hackman.
Thank you.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you went to school, what makes you an IMG, and those nitty details that we like to hear?
Sure. I'd love to share with you and all your followers. So, first off, I did my undergrad at San Francisco State University. I studied biophysiology. And then from there, I applied to a bunch of U.S. med schools. I thought I'd be a shoo-in. I thought I'd get in. And after the first round, I didn't get in. And I was left with the decision to make. Do I take another year and a half to restudy, wait for the next cycle? Or do I start literally in 3 months, start my medical school career? And so I looked at my options and I talked to some people that have been down that path before. And I went ahead with the decision and went to Caribbean Med School, graduated last year, and now I'm a first-year resident in emergency medicine, and I'm loving every minute of it. I'm so happy.
Yes, amazing. Congratulations. I mean, I hear a lot from other folk that attempted to get into medical school here, later on chose the pathway of going to the Caribbean. And I'm so grateful that it's worked out for all of us to try that. So congratulations to you. So you mentioned that you are currently an emergency medicine resident. So we're really going to go into what it takes to become an EM resident, especially as a graduate of a foreign school. Can you walk us through maybe, what you would consider from your journey, the requirements for EM residency? Can you tell us a little bit about what makes an applicant stand out?
Sure. So I would say that when it all boils down to is just always doing your best. Always give it 150%. Because not only is that important during your medical school journey, studying for your boards, but it's so much more so, and I didn't realize this going into emergency medicine, but it's so much more so, it holds true as an ER resident. I am working so hard. I've never worked this hard in my life. I'm working tirelessly. I love every minute of it, don't get me wrong, but it's just, at the end of the day, you just always got to work hard. And so through med school, through studying, you always just got to keep giving it your best. If you don't, if one of your exams doesn't go well, that's okay. Just keep doing your best. Like, ask yourself what did you do wrong, correct those things, and keep at it.
Yeah, definitely. Hard work goes a long way. And I think one thing that you're pointing out too is being intentional and being repetitive as far as we don't work hard for one day and then stop. You continue to do that even once you get into residency. Like you continue to put your best foot forward. Yeah. So really some specific questions that come up with that is, well, what are the score requirements? Like what did you make or what do I have to make if I wanted to match EM? That's one of the questions I get a lot of times is, doc, if I want to do general surgery, what score do I need? If I want to do family medicine, what score do I need? So we're asking you specifically for EM, because we know you've researched this, you've been through this before. Is there a score target that we need to get to? And if you don't mind to share your experience with the boards.
Yeah, of course, of course. So I remember going through the process and looking, what is that golden score that you need to get to be considered for an EM residency? And I think when I was looking at it, it was around like 240 for US citizen IMGs. And so throughout my first and second year, third year of med school, going for step 1 and step 2, that was always my goal. And so when I was studying for it, that was the number I was trying to hit. But in reality, what happened was I actually ended up scoring a 231 on step 1. And for me, initially, that was devastating. You have this number that you've been trying to hit for such a long time. You're writing your whole career on this number. And then you feel like a failure. When in actuality, it's not a bad score. That's still a good score. It's still like at average or above average. And as long as you hit that minimum, so each program has kind of their minimum step score requirements to get in. And although, yes, 240 to 245 is the average score for a US IMG for emergency medicine, each program has a minimum score that you need to hit to get your foot into the door. And as long as you hit that score, that I think it was 230, you'll be okay. They're going to look at your application. And so that's where you need to take into consideration the rest of your application and make that as best as you can to be the strongest applicant. And so another important thing also, which reminds me, don't beat yourself up if you don't hit a score that you were going for. It's okay. Keep going. Don't give up.
Right. I agree. Now, you did mention for us to consider the other parts of our application. And that's what I usually call like the CV builders.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that you would consider important for EM? You can touch on maybe like the slowies and why that is important and what that is even. Is research important? Is rotating at an EM facility or a facility with an EM residency program as a student, an AI, those things important in EM? Can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, everything that you just mentioned, pretty much is important for those CV builders in EM. So you really need to make yourself as an EM applicant the best applicant you can be outside of your step score. So I would say the 2 or 3 most important things are, 1, those SLOEs, which are standardized letters of evaluation. It's your letter of rec specific to emergency medicine. So it's written by the program directors of the emergency departments that you rotated at, and it's standardized across all rotators. And so it's an objective way programs are able to evaluate you. And so as a rotator in EM, trying to match into EM, you better be a rock star on that rotation. So just show up every day early, leave late, just shine during the rotation. So if you can know the heart score, your Welch criteria, these little algorithms that EM physicians follow to help in their decision making, if you kind of know these little nuances, you'll definitely shine during your rotation. You'll stand out. Also, besides your slowies, I think research is very important. And it's difficult. As IMGs, I don't have a research department at my school that feed me a bunch of papers and get me published a bunch of times. So that's a difficult hurdle for us IMGs. So you really need to put yourself out there and just try and get...
Today's guest is a phenomenal author, emergency medicine physician, boss, entrepreneur, business lady, and it's none other than my co-author and co-producer of the book, Still MD. So let's welcome Dr. Kimberly Brown to the podcast. Hello, Dr. Brown.
Hey, Dr. Nina, thank you so much.
No, We are thankful for you. I mean, I've been friends with you now for the last maybe 6 to 8 months, and it's been just an amazing journey getting to know you and just enjoying your company as both a co-author and as an IMG that's willing to inspire other people. So, we're going to ask you some heated questions based on what the audience wants to know. Can you tell us a little bit
Ooh,
more
heated
about
questions.
Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So again, you gave me such a great introduction. My name is Dr. Kimberly Brown. I'm a newly board certified emergency physician. I'm also a U.S. IMG. So I was born and raised in the state of Wisconsin. Milwaukee, Wisconsin is my hometown. I went to undergrad at Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, knowing the whole time that I wanted to become a physician, but I did not do well on my MCAT. So what I decided to do is pursue a degree in public health, and I did that at the University of Florida. And so I graduated in 2010 with my Master's of Public Health with a concentration in public health management and policy. And it was while I was in my graduate program that I was accepted to Ross University School of Medicine. And that's when Ross was in Dominica, but now it is currently in Barbados. So that's basically who I am. I also ended up going to residency at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis, Tennessee. I matched to my number one choice program, and that was in 2015, and I graduated. Now I can't believe it's about to be, well, it's technically 2 years now, so in 2018. So I am second year attending. So been a busy couple of years for me, for sure.
Yeah, sounds like an amazing year. Congratulations on becoming board certified, and even bigger congrats on all the work that you've done thus far. So, can you tell us a little bit more about emergency medicine? Maybe walk us through the structure of EM residency and why you chose that particular specialty.
Sure. So I decided to go into emergency medicine while I was doing my public health program at the University of Florida. I had never heard of EM before I took a trip overseas as a pre-medical student / public health student. And they put me in accident and casualty in Quito, Ecuador. And I was supposed to be focusing on maternal and child health. And so because I was focused on becoming an OBGYN, Milwaukee has a very high teen pregnancy rate. So I was trying to give back to my hometown by becoming an OBGYN and helping other teen moms know, more about their bodies. But this accident and casualty experience happened to me, which is basically Ecuador's equivalent of an emergency department. So I showed up, it was a Monday, and there are people everywhere. There are kids, there are adults, there's old people. And so it was myself, several other pre-med students, and actually medical students. It was a resident in the Ecuadorian medical system there, and there was an attending. And for the whole morning, we just saw patients. Whoever came through the door, we treated them, and we basically streeted them or admitted them to the hospital. But I had so much fun trying to guess what was going to come through the doors next. Was there going to be a woman? Was it going to be a kid? What kind of complaint was they going to have? And that was also the first time I was able, as a pre-med student, to actually work hands-on with patients. I was never allowed to do anything really other than listen to heart and lung sounds. And I didn't really know what I was listening to as a pre-med student. So I was learning how to give injections, started IVs, and I loved being able to work with my hands and actually see a variety of people. And so that's where my passion for emergency medicine started. So few days after me going into accident and casualty, I went to the internet cafe, which I'm pretty sure they don't have any of these anymore. And I started Googling, what is accident and casualty in the United States? And up popped emergency medicine. And I knew from that point on, I wanted to be an ER doctor. So that being said, emergency medicine residency is structured kind of like how an experience in the ER would be, meaning we have a pretty broad base of training. We make sure we have OBGYN rotations, we have peds rotations, we also have trauma rotations, orthopedic surgery rotations. There's lots of ICU experience there. We also do anesthesia, so we can learn how to intubate, and we also do ultrasound. So there's a broad base of what we learn, from kind of the more routine things to also the taking care of critically ill patients as well. And that's what I love, the kind of unpredictability of what's going to happen when I walk into a shift, that I can take care of someone that's, pretty routine, pretty in and out, simple, easy, to medically complex and critically ill and needs to be, admitted to the ICU or maybe even transferred to another hospital. I love to stretch my capabilities as a physician.
Wow, that's amazing. And I believe you did talk a little bit more about this, actually a lot more about this in the book, Still MD. Can you just kind of talk to us now, more so focusing on requirements for IMGs to match into EM? What are those requirements? What would you say make up a solid application that would, put an IMG's best foot forward when it comes to the match?
Absolutely. So anybody that wants to apply to emergency medicine, more specifically, if you're interested in emergency medicine, you 100% have to have what's called a SLO, which is a standard letter of evaluation. It is a type of letter of recommendation, but it's only used within emergency medicine residency programs to rate and to rank applicants that are going into emergency medicine. So those letters, those SLOs, SLOEs, are only given to you by emergency medicine residency programs when you rotate as a fourth year medical student. The tough thing for IMGs, however, is that a lot of emergency medicine residency programs are attached to universities that have some limiting factors for IMGs to rotate there. They only take students from USMD or DO schools. And so it can be difficult for an IMG to find programs that will allow them to rotate as an international student, thereby obtaining a SLO. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. Still, every year, there continues to be Caribbean medical students that are matching into emergency medicine programs that have obtained those letters. And there's a small few group of programs that are out there that are welcome to you, but you just have to make sure that you have at least 2 of those rotations on your application when you're applying to make sure that you're competitive. Also, step scores are also extremely important. EM is becoming more and more competitive every year as other students from the U.S., both DO and MD programs, are becoming more interested in emergency medicine. So no spots go unfilled. So it's very hard to soap or to scramble into an emergency medicine program. So making sure that you have high step scores and no fails are very important to your application. And more specific,
today's guest is Dr. Lara Zekar.
Yeah, close. It's Jekar.
Jekar.
Yes, exactly. You did great.
Dr. Lara Jekar. I like it.
Yes.
So can you tell us where you're located right now and where you're calling from?
Yeah, sure. So I'm calling from Slovenia, which is a small country in the Central Europe. You've probably heard of it, maybe by some famous people out there in the States that come from here. Not gonna say names, but you probably know them.
So Melania Trump is from Slovenia, right?
She is.
So I'm really happy to hear that, because I think maybe you're the first person that took my course from Slovenia. Like, I don't think I've had anybody from Slovenia take my course before you. And then I think ever since you've taken it, maybe 1 or 2 people have dialed in from there. So that's pretty cool. So can you tell us what you're doing right now in Slovenia?
Yeah, so I'm actually an emergency medicine resident here. Position I'm gonna live in a few months to go to the States to be a resident there. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And one of the reasons that I invited you on is so you can tell us how you did that. Yeah, so congratulations. You just matched in March of 2021, but I've known you probably for about 2 years, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of enrolled in the IMG roadmap course 2 years before actually trying to match, because I wanted to make sure that, my application is 100% ready for it to go in action. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's been pretty amazing to see you do all the different things that you've done over the last 2 years preparing toward your match. Because one thing I really admired about your journey was you were very intentional from the very beginning. And you're like, even though I'm going to apply this far out, I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing now that's preparing me for when I do apply. So I really find that very gratifying because I'm sort of a person that also likes to think long term and think far ahead. So I really admire that about what you've done so far. So tell us where you be going and where you matched, if you don't mind.
I would be glad to tell that. So I matched into UC Davis Emergency Medicine Residency. It was one of the so-called REACH programs, somewhere where I've never thought I would match. And I did, and it's amazing. And I am so excited to be starting there in July.
That is pretty amazing. So UC Davis, that's University of California, Davis, yes. Right? Just so anybody listening will kind of be able to go look it up or know what you're referring to. And obviously, as a person you applied, you're in Slovenia, you're located there, you applied and you matched, and you'll be coming here in June to do residency. Somebody listening right now is like, what in the world? How is that possible? So are you a US IMG or a non-US IMG?
I am a non-US IMG. I graduated from University of Ljubljana in 2018. I've never practiced medicine or have any official rotations in the States. So definitely a big non-US IMG.
Yeah.
In all meaning.
Yeah. And are you going to get a visa? Is that your plan to train? Or?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I'm applying for J1 visa.
J1 visa. Okay, great. Mm-hmm. So you did say that you didn't have experience in the States, but you've traveled to the States before.
Yeah, I mean, I did. We just didn't have any official rotations through our medical school. It was all extracurriculars. So we didn't have any official rotations. It was just our own free time. I actually had 4 unofficial rotations in the States, which were cardiology, cardiothoracic surgery, and 2 emergency medicine rotations, none of which were actually through medical school or our curriculum. So.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that played a role. When I look at your story, I think that the fact that you actually did those rotations, even though you did them outside of your medical school curriculum, the fact that you took the effort and time, because I remember I chatted with you once when you came to the States and you were doing your rotations. Were these observerships or rotations, and how did you get them?
It's hard to pinpoint what exactly those were, because they were done through the payable, the agencies that you have to pay a fee for the rotation. It was not through medical school there or through a residency program there. So in a sense, it was hands-on, but it didn't actually count as a clinical rotation, if you understand what I'm saying. I still got a standardized letter of evaluation, which is something that you really have to have if applying to emergency medicine. It was just non-faculty standardized letter of recommendation, which I think holds less value as a typical SLOE does, but it was a letter of recommendation nonetheless, so it did help. I'm confident that it did. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. So for those who are listening right now or watching, and they're going to ask, what's she talking about? So if you're applying into emergency medicine, it is required that you present a standard letter of recommendation or a standard letter of evaluation. And it's called a SLOE, SLOE. And so what Dr. Jekar is mentioning here is that you have to have one of such letters. Typically should be done by an academic emergency medicine physician or program director in emergency medicine or chairman of the Department of Emergency Medicine. But she got hers from faculty members. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So today on the show, I have an emergency medicine resident Her name is Dr. Natalia Grigorian. She's on today to share just some insightful, deep comments on her journey, her process as an IMG, and we hope that you can learn from it. Dr. Natalia, welcome to the show.
Hi, Nina. Thank you for having me on your podcast, and hello, everyone.
Well, before any further ado, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe particularly where you're from, what makes you an IMG, your medical education, and that kind of material?
Absolutely. So, as Dr. Nina mentioned, I am Dr. Grigorian, but they call me Dr. G. I am I'm Russian Armenian. I moved to California when I was a preteen, and eventually my life led me, and I became an IMG, meaning I'm a USA citizen that has decided to go to medical school outside the United States. And I'm not your conventional student. When I started medical school, I was in my 30s with a 6-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. I went to originally medical school in Mexico, and it was the G. After completing my basic science courses there, I decided it will be best in my future career to transfer out and continue my clinicals in the United States.
Wow, well planned out. Sounds like. I know one other doctor that I did a Kaplan course with that graduated from a medical school in Mexico. And I know another one actually that I work with who is a cardiologist who started off in Mexico and transferred to the Caribbean. And so it's not unusual. I also transferred schools. So it's not unusual that some of us sometimes have to go through 2 different schools to obtain our medical diploma. But, we'd like to learn a little bit more about you currently. What specialty are you in? What level of training?
Well, I'm very humbled to say that I actually got into the residency of my dreams, which is emergency medicine. I'm currently halfway through. It's a 3-year program, so I'm currently PGY2.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That must have been very fulfilling, to make it to the residency of your dreams. That's kind of our tagline here, too. I like to talk about people achieving their goals and whatever that is for themselves. So can you tell us a little bit about maybe the timeline for you, like when you took the steps?
I definitely will. So there is, when I actually started in January of 2010. I took my 6-month-old and a 2.5-year-old and then drove over there and started my first 2 years basic sciences there. Unfortunately, for personal reasons, and like I said, for my future career, I made a decision that I need to transfer out of that school and make sure I do all my clinical experience in the United States, because as we know today, that a lot of residents even though whether you're IMG or FMG, they want you to have USA clinical experience at least a year prior to applying for residency. So to eliminate that gap, which actually didn't eliminate much of a gap, and for family personal reasons, I took about 2.5 years break while I was planning my transfer, and I ended up transferring out. Took my step 1 in 2014. I passed it on my first attempt. I had decent scores. And then same thing with step 2, passed it on my first try. And that was in November of 2016.
Well, and what year did you match into residency?
So for all those who haven't matched the first time, there is hope, definitely. I applied in 2016 of November 29, which as we all know, it's already too late, but I didn't want to give up and lose another year. So I ended up not matching for 2017. And I applied again in 2017 to get into 2018. And again, I did not match. As we know, having an IMG stuck behind your MD kind of can prevent a lot of options, especially if you are shooting for a residency that is very competitive. And as we know, ER, anesthesia, radiology, surgery can be very competitive. And at this point, every other right now specialty is pretty competitive. But I didn't match. So 2 years I went unmatched. And I ended up getting into a program that got accredited after the match. So it was my opportunity and it worked out. So I started as a PGY1 in 2018.
Wow, that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible because, for 2 years, you did not give up on your goal. You had a plan and mission in sight and you kept pushing through. Can you walk us through maybe what things that you learned along the way during that gap period? What are some lessons learned and what advice do you have for other IMGs that are dealing with gaps? What should they do in that time? What should they do to get them to residency from your experience?
So when you finish your medical school, you have maximum almost of 2 years before you get into residency, because if you're out of clinicals for 2 years or more, most residencies will not accept you. However, because mine was a different case and I'm only speaking from my personal experience, like I said, I'm not a conventional student. I was a mother when I started with 2 young kids. When I did graduate medical school, because I wasn't able to be with my children as much as I want to, especially during my clinicals, because I traveled for some rotations, but I decided that I'm not going to go into research or do anything. I wanted to take that year while I was waiting for my first residency to hopefully get in to spend time with my family. So, some years I lost, you cannot recapture, but I wanted to invest my time and be present with my kids. What I did learn, honestly, it's not a straight line to get to what you want. When I started medical school, we all have these dreams and hopes. We always say, oh, I'm going to get in medical school, I'm going to graduate, and I'm going to get into so and so, your choice of residency. But the reality of it is, and I don't mean to sound like Debbie Downer, but the harsh reality was, just because you get into medical school, there are scores and tests that you have to pass. Number two, even if you graduate, it does not mean you will get the choice of the residency you would like, let alone any residency. So that's not one thing people tell you, is that so there's a lot of obstacles along the way. And I'm comparing this, I cannot speak for the USA graduates. I'm only speaking for my personal experience as an IMG. So there was a lot of challenges. And like I said, being a mother was no easy task while trying to balance school. What I can say is that definitely I learned about my character and my capabilities, my drive, my ambition, and the sacrifices I was able to make and was willing to make to get to where I am now. It's not for everyone, but definitely make sure the key support is your family. You surround yourself with people who believe in you. You'll have possibly a lot of doors close on you, and that's okay, and expect that. But always try to have plan A, B, C, and even with hard work, sometimes does not pay off. I did everything right, like I briefly mentioned to you in the past. I've built network connections, shadowed, was relevant, kept touch with people. I just didn't show up 2 days before applying for residency. Say, hey, remember me? No, it's a network you build months, even years ahead. Go to conferences, just build network. Just like I said, don't show up a few days before and say, hey, remember I talked to you 2 years ago. Remember me? No, they're not going to remember you. And even if they do know you, sometimes it doesn't work. But yeah, it was a lot of sacrifices. That's all I can say. Tears, frustrations, and this path demands a lot of you.
Yeah. I believe, not matching can be one of the most devastating feelings that a person has in their life, really, because it almost in that moment can feel as if you're a failure. But when indeed with perseverance and going back to the drawing board and figuring out, hey, what thing could I have done differently? What is another thing that I can try to do? Unfortunately, sometimes you do your very best, you work hard, and things just don't work out as they should.
Absolutely.
But it's important. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I can't say that I did not get in 2 matches in a row. So you can imagine that devastation and the dark times. You feel desperation and you question everything. And you question all the advice where people said you need to show up earlier than your shift. You have to stay there after you do your, be the last one to leave, do everything right. And, I did all that and it still didn't pan out in the beginning, but it was definitely difficult. And one advice I can definitely tell people is, number one, don't screw up your GPA when you get out of high school. That's number one. Number two, do your best to get into USA school. It will eliminate a lot of heartaches and a lot of obstacles. But right. Definitely reached out to probably every single program coordinator. And the interesting part, like I said before, I got in 2018 and in 2019, I got an email to an email I wrote back in January of 2018. And they said, yeah, just try applying into our match this year. But I was already getting ready to start PGY too. So it reminded me where I came from, you know.
Today's guest is Dr. Lola Akinfemiwa, and I'm so excited to have her on because she just recently matched into emergency medicine and she's super excited and going through the onboarding process as we speak. Welcome on the show, Dr. Lola. Tell the people where you're calling in from because they need to know. They need to know you're international.
Yeah, I am international. So I'm calling in from Toronto, Canada, and that's where I grew up.
Can you tell us where you went to medical school?
Yeah, so I went to St. George's University School of Medicine, and that is in Grenada.
Awesome. SGU is famously known. And what's your year of graduation?
So I just graduated, actually. So 2021, I'm officially done.
So you just graduated and you applied into the most recent match cycle. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And was this your first time applying?
Yes, it was my first time applying. So I'm really grateful that I was able to match on my first try.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So do you mind telling us what specialty you matched into? You don't have to share the name of the program if you don't want to, but just give us some idea of where you're headed and what you're heading into.
So I matched into emergency medicine and I'll be going to Chicago.
Awesome. Congratulations. That's pretty awesome. And as a Caribbean grad, did people try to distract you from going into emergency medicine? Did you hear any of the, well, that's too competitive, or you should try something else, and all that negative self-talk that people try to impose on you? Did you hear that?
Well, I was told to apply to backup specialties just because emergency medicine is becoming more and more competitive. No one ever discouraged me, but I was always reminded to just have a backup plan just in case, because I'm an international student and also I'm Nigerian Canadian, so I would need a visa as well. But no one ever discouraged me from applying.
Well, that's good. That's good. I like that It was more of a positive influence in your choice with the contact that you had. That's pretty remarkable. And during medical school, did you always know you wanted to do emergency medicine, or was this sort of something like, at what point did you realize this is what you were interested in?
Yeah, I was one of those students that had no idea. I was all over the place. I thought I wanted to do OBGYN at some point, and then I really liked surgery. And it was really down to surgery and EM, but I realized that I didn't like to be in the OR that much. And I was able to do an emergency medicine rotation and just absolutely loved it. And here we are.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So how many emergency medicine programs did you apply into?
So I applied to 120 something programs, which I wouldn't recommend, but because we weren't going to have to travel, so I was saving money in that regard. So just to cover all my bases, I applied to more programs.
Oh, I see. Because it was a virtual cycle, you decided to allocate maybe your travel expenses into more programs to sort of really improve your chances of getting invited for virtual interviews. That's what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then also as a Canadian, I would imagine that you knew that you were going to require a visa, right? And so you were thinking, let me make sure that I guarantee that I have interviews to improve my chances of matching. Because obviously there's some programs that don't sponsor visas. And so that almost kind of limits the pool of the number of programs that you may be eligible to apply into just by that visa criteria. Did that play a role in the number of programs that you picked?
Absolutely. If I would go on the website and if they didn't mention anything about visas, or if they explicitly say that they don't sponsor visas, I didn't bother applying to programs. So it was easier for me to, I guess, narrow down the programs that I was going to apply to, because it's not negotiable, right?
Yeah, and that's something that it baffles me sometimes when I talk to, very rarely does this happen, but it has happened, where non-US IMG applies into a program that does not sponsor visas. And I'm like, why would you do that? Because no way on earth that they're going to change the rules. It's not a suggestion. It means that they don't have the paperwork to support visa sponsorship. And so that becomes a really big deal.
Exactly.
If you have a visa, the process of sponsoring a visa doesn't change like overnight. The facility has to be working on it for years to get appropriate documentation, the appropriate procedure in place from the Department of State to be able to sponsor it. So definitely a tip there for anybody listening who has a visa. One, you don't have to shy away from a specialty that you like because you have a visa. And then two, from learning from your story, Dr. Lola, like if you know that you require a visa, then don't bother applying into places that clearly do not sponsor visas, because you're just going to be wasting your money at that point. Can you take us back into some challenges that you experienced along your journey during this process?
Sure. Okay, so being Canadian, of course, I wanted to stay in Canada for medical school. So I applied right after graduating, and unfortunately, at the time, I didn't get in. And so I decided to apply to Caribbean medical schools the second time around. And thankfully, St. George's accepted me into the medical school. Now, my school gives us opportunity to do 1 year of medical school in the UK. So I did 1 year in the UK, and then my second year in Grenada, and then I went to the United States for my clinical rotations. And so being far away from home and still having to perform well in medical school, and then also just traveling all over the place was really challenging, because you have to adjust to a new place, a new way of life, a new people each year. Thankfully, I had a good group of people around me to keep me grounded and keep me focused. But I think that the challenging thing for me was just not being around family. And that was really difficult.
Yeah. And that's the process the part of the process that we don't often talk about, because we want to be strong and goal getters. So we're going for our goals, but we sacrifice a lot. We sacrifice a lot of important human connection. Look at you. I'm so proud of you for listening until the very end. And because of that, you deserve a reward. And I want you to go right now to drninalum.com and download any of my free ebooks, whether it's for electives or clinical rotations, or even just whatever trials come your way as you navigate your IMG journey. Stay tuned for another episode coming up next.